Asia Tech Podcast with Graham Brown and Michael Waits.
Hi, this is Michael Waits from Asia Tech Podcast Stories. I'm with Anna Gong. Anna is the CEO and board member of Perx Technologies. Good morning, Anna. How are you?
Good morning, Michael. Great, thank you.
So I was saying before we started for real that I was nervous. I don't know why. Maybe it's just because you just seem insanely experienced. I mean that. And, you know, there are so many questions I want to ask you, but I really just want to start with, and I can give you my answer, but like, how did you get involved in technology? Because when I started, like, you know, I was in high school, and I literally remember someone standing in front of my class and saying, almost like that scene out of The Graduate, right? Plastics. You got to be plastics or something like that. And they just said, computer programming. You've got to be a computer programming. And it just sounded like the driest possible thing in the world to me.
Right.
And then here we are. I was going to say 30 years later, but for me, it's more like 40 years. But for me, it's more like 40 years later. And it's not that much, but still. And here we are today. And now, you know, tech are like the rock stars of the world, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's all timing and also location. Right after I graduated, I moved up to San Francisco, and yeah, you know, most of the colleagues that I worked with at Pricewaterhouse, and back then it was before PwC.
Right.
And that actually gives you a good idea of how old I am too. When you say all these names like Coopers and Lybrand,
right? The Big Seven, the Big Six. Yeah. I can't remember what it was.
So most of my colleagues actually went into functional management consulting. And then because we were based in San Francisco, I had directives to go into technical consulting, which is mostly implementation projects on large-scale applications like SAP, right?
Right.
So that's how my career started in the tech world immediately after college,
Wow.
even though I graduated with an econ degree.
So did I.
So, yeah. So it's purely by accident, and during that time it's tech boom, right? So in San Francisco, you're just kind of like drawn into all of the startups and the craziness of the .com parties and recruitment and talent acquisition. So everybody was so inundated with opportunities, and so you get distracted quite easily.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel badly, right? Because while that was going on, I was living in Tokyo and I was immersed in finance, right? Which, in retrospect, so boring. I don't even know why they made movies about it, to be fair. But it must have been amazing. Like, you just get sucked into this environment, and particularly in San Francisco, right? I mean, in the old days, you would have been in Boston, right, on Route 128. I think that's where EMC was founded and Lotus was founded. But if you're in San Francisco, you're literally at the epicenter of what's happening. And sure, in 2000 and, you know, 2001, go back to 1999, it was a massive boom and then a massive bust. But you just stuck it out, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the experience of the highs and lows was just amazing, because you've seen so many failures. I mean, this is my 5th startup experience and first in Asia with Perx. But in terms of the 4 companies prior to Perx, the 4 startups in the Bay Area, 3 of them failed, and probably failed quite miserably. And then one of them went.
Does anybody fail nicely? I don't know.
Actually, yeah, you kind of just say F you, you know, you go on a high, and then you say, let's start over.
Fair enough.
There's lots of resilient founders out there. And, you know, I started in a couple of companies where I was either the 4th employee or maybe the 10th employee for the first couple of startups. And you just, you know, sink your teeth in it, and you wear so many hats. And as early 20s to mid 20s, you have no idea what's up or down. And so you're just kind of finding your way. So you learn pretty quickly on what to do or what not to do. But during that time, it was so much fun, because your growth trajectory as a personal development and professionally as well, it just exponentially multiplies during that time.
Right. I mean, I just, you know, during my research, I look at what you've been involved in, and it's just amazing. And you're right. Maybe it's that personal growth that's even more important than that professional growth. I don't know. I find that, like, the things that I lean on today are more like what happened to me personally and how can I apply that to my professional life. It just seems so much deeper. Sure, like all the technical stuff that I've learned is super helpful, but I find like who I am really drives what I do more than what I've learned at work. And of course, my work is way different than yours, for sure. Yours has way more impact and is way better. And I mean that. That's not me just like blowing smoke around. So what do you learn after being, for years in San Francisco? And then what brings you home? I presume you're originally from Singapore?
No, actually, a lot of people are mistaken that.
But fair enough. I mean, it's a fair presumption, right?
Right. Yeah, Asian face. But I actually was born in China.
Awesome.
I'm from Guangzhou.
Even better.
And I immigrated to Florida because my maternal grandmother was born in New York. And then I guess after the Cultural Revolution, she moved everyone back. And my parents went with them. And that's how we landed in Florida, because all the snowbirds from New York came down, and we needed warmer climate. So for some reason, my family decided to uproot themselves to Florida. So I grew up there.
Can I back up for a second? This is actually really interesting to me. So your maternal grandmother, your mother's mother, left China during the Cultural Revolution.
Yes.
And ended up
after the culture. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, for God's sakes, like, what a ridiculously difficult time. And again, I talk about this too because my grandfather left Russia when he was 7 years old. Mm-hmm. Right? So not dissimilar. And you just imagine what it must have been like. We talk a lot about first world problems, but
yeah.
It's difficult. I couldn't get into this restaurant, or like my car broke down. But I'd think about my grandfather, and then fast forward to your grandmother, the same thing. What must it have been like to sort of leave there and end up in Florida? Just can't imagine.
My mother was a nurse. My dad was a professor. I mean, they had to start over, similar to, the Eastern Europeans who immigrated to the U.S. You have all these PhD candidates and doctors. Right. They come over, and then they're like janitors, or they're cooks, and that's exactly what ended up happening with my parents. And they evolved and worked in my family's restaurant business. And, to see such talented people who built their careers in their home country and to come and start over, and you become so humbled, right? And then you feel so indebted to them too. Who sacrifices themselves like that anymore?
Nobody. Nobody.
Right?
Everybody's so entitled. That's my point, right? Is everyone's so entitled. How come I don't have this? Where is my thing of that? Whatever it is. And yet, I look at my grandfather for inspiration all the time, and I think, when he was 7, he walked across the continent, got onto a boat, speaking had no language skills and no cultural skills as well, and then made enough money. And it's not the money that matters, right? It's just earned enough, like, to get his whole family, out of their country as well. That to me is amazing. Yeah,
and I didn't speak a word of English, to tell you the truth, when I moved at 8 years old to Florida.
Wow.
And I faced a lot of discrimination. I had to persevere and be more resilient, because during that time it was just not common to see immigrants in the U.S., and we endure so much discrimination. Yeah,
it's really interesting. So I've got so many friends. Obviously, I've been living in Asia for almost 30 years, right? And there is a time, and now is actually part of that time, where being Asian is actually super cool, right?
Yeah.
You walk into a room in New York, and everyone's like, wow, they must be from China, or maybe they're from Korea or something like that, and it's just super cool. And yet I have friends that grew up in South Boston who, parents were half Japanese and half American, and let me tell you something, it was not cool.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't matter to me, frankly, but back then it just was not cool. And there was a massive amount of, bullying, and sort of, it was just highly problematic for them. So I don't understand it, right? Because I was born in a way and in a place where I didn't have to experience that. But boy, it's hard, and no one gets that today, really, right? Again, they'll look at you and just think, never had a problem. Right.
And that's why when you try to look at building your company and finding the right DNA, sometimes, you're looking for that person with grit, right? And is there enough grit in their DNA to actually help you grow? Because startups are not easy experiences. You have to have the resiliency to endure all of the highs and lows. And when the lows are coming, it's really low. So there are times where I wasn't sure I was going to make payroll, and then you have to endure that you don't affect the employees, and you literally go through months of your own sacrifice and not getting paid. And so you just have to, be the captain of the ship, right? So you can't let them know that the company is actually not doing well. And lo and behold, I mean, we turned around. But during certain tough times, you just have to fake it till you make it.
Yeah, I mean, look, that word resilience, right, and resiliency is really important. And again, you're now found yourself in an industry where it's cool to be like a startup founder, right? And people like to talk about their funding and their growth, and it's also cool to be a startup founder in Asia. But the reality is that like every day is a slog, and it's really, I think it's way harder than most people sort of imagine. And I agree with you. Like when I when I find people that I want to work with people that have not always had some kind of privilege, but that have had to fight through something, because I want to understand when they're going to give up.
Yeah.
I really do.
Exactly.
I want to understand deeply, like, what is it going to take for them to realize that every day no individual day is fatal until it is. And if it's not, how do we get through it? And I'll tell you this too. One of the happiest moments in my life came this year when I helped a company get funded. And I realized that it wasn't just for the founders. I mean, it wasn't the only realization of this, but they posted a photo of 40 employees who would have likely lost their jobs if we didn't fund the company, right? And that's 40 families. That's a lot of people.
Right.
Right. So
exactly.
So your responsibility when you were talking about making payroll and just making sure that all your employees and their families are taken care of, right? It's like what your grandfather tells you when you get married. You're not marrying one person. You're marrying an entire family. It's the same thing. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. And I totally agree. And so that's why you think employees first. Everything comes before you.
Yeah, I mean, I won't even ask you, but I mean, I haven't had a salary in 6 years, so I don't worry. I don't worry about it.
You're actually in a much better place than me.
Yeah, fair enough. We can compare on the misery scale, like who's outperforming whom.
Yeah.
So when did you move to Singapore?
2009, and I moved over with one of the successful startups that was acquired by CA Technologies, Computer Associates, in the past. And that was Wiley Technology. And Wiley actually got acquired in 2006. And then 2009, they asked me to come out to Asia because I was one of the first team members who helped build the Asia business out of San Francisco. And then when they were acquired, or the new team took it over, they didn't see much growth, and so they said, can you come back and help us fix this business or help us grow? And I moved over in 2009, and then 6 months later they said, we have a bigger problem in Japan. Can you come and fix it? So I moved to Japan for a year and a half, and grew the business year over year 220%, and I moved back to Singapore in about 2011, I say. Yeah. And right before the earthquake, I was very lucky.
Where did you live in Tokyo?
Roppongi. Actually, Oakwood, Midtown.
Wow, you lived in Midtown.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, I was given the privilege to live well.
Where were you? Believe me, you've earned it. Where were the CA offices?
In Shinjuku, and then I think we moved to Roppongi Hills.
Oh, nice. I worked in Roppongi Hills as well. It's a great area.
Oh, love that area.
Yeah, really nice. As a matter of fact, I'm there now.
Oh, great.
Well, I'm in Minamiyazabu, but close enough. I'll be in Roppongi later today for lunch and stuff.
Right.
But I digress. Anyway, so you stayed with CA and then you moved to Singapore with them. And had you personally, like as an adult, lived in Asia before that?
No, I didn't know what the hell was happening.
But see sorry, tell me I'm wrong with this, but I love this too. So now you have the reverse problem.
Exactly, reverse simulation.
You do though, because now everyone looks at you and has an expectation. Oh, she gets it, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, even after moving to Japan, they told my U.S. execs, what on earth are you doing to send a Chinese female to Japan to run her business? Like, are you effing kidding me? This is going to set her up for failure, right? In the male-dominated economy. So, right. But it worked out really well because, I think it's really who you are, right? You come across not looking submissive or as another Asian female, I would say manager. I came in as an American, right? So when I speak, they can tell that I'm an American. And when I do business with them, my tactics and my style is very American. And so they actually appreciated that, and they treated me like just anybody. And so that's why the efficiency, I said business is business. I sometimes find cultural excuses, a massive excuse around why people fail or succeed. I really enjoyed Jack Welch's explanation about, global business is business. It's not about culture. But you do have to localize your solutions and localize, certain dealings. But in terms of business across borders, when you do a deal, it's the same way. So I really enjoy my time in Japan. And so I defied everyone's predictions, and we succeeded.
Yeah, it seems to be a life theme, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Which isn't a bad thing. So how did you get involved again when you were in Singapore, back in the startup world?
How did I get back into the startup world?
Well, because you have this incredible experience dealing with very large enterprises, and I presume a lot of that is in sales and deal making, and just that, as you said, you've had super success increasing sales, not just in the 15 to 20%, in the 200 to 300% range, right? It seems like every time you touch a sales project, it explodes, right? And on the enterprise side, that's hard. That's really hard work, I think.
Yeah. It's really hard. I know you're seeing most companies who, take away some of their acquisitions and the new startups that they're acquiring, but the typical companies, the large top 10 tech companies, they're growing at sub 5% year over year, right? And so optically, they're growing now at 40% in cloud business or 60% because of all the acquisitions. So it is tough growing an enterprise business. And I would say my whole what drives me is really disruption, right? Disruptive technology. And when you're a maverick within a large company and try to move needles, it just doesn't really work as well. And because you have so much legacy and infrastructure and processes, it just bogs you down, too much red tape. So if you're trying to move very quickly, that's why I enjoy going back to a startup, because we move so fast and there is no red tape, and we execute, within seconds. And so I enjoy that kind of speed of execution and also speed of innovation.
Right. It's really interesting for me, right? So I worked at Goldman Sachs for a few years, for like 6 or 7 years, and you would think that at a company with that reputation that things would move really quickly as well. And yet all of these big companies, whether it's in finance or in tech, they do have legacy systems, and it's hard to explain externally how hard it is, because there's an entire infrastructure built around supporting them, right?
Mm-hmm, exactly. And so that's why there's 100 resources to help you do one thing. Right. But
there's not even 2 resources to help you do another thing, and that's the hardest part, right? And you can look at all the disruption that's taking place globally right now, and it's really a lot of people just saying, I don't want to exist inside of a large organization because I can't get what I need to get done, not even what I want to get done, right?
Mm-hmm, exactly.
So how did you find Perx?
So Perx was not really my original company. I was brought in as a professional CEO to help grow the company. However, when I came in, it was a very different situation. I quickly realized that the B2C app business or model wasn't going to scale. And the founders actually did a really good job at pioneering the whole mobile loyalty space. And many companies, came in copy and follow suit, and a lot of them also failed over the last 2-3 years. And so most of them are gone. And I realized that there was a much bigger problem that we could help solve, which is the enterprise space. There's a huge discrepancy in terms of how large B2C companies like the banks, insurance, telcos, and retailing, that they have an issue with building relationships with their consumers. The only proactive engagement we ever get from our service providers is just an email to remind us to pay our bill, right?
Right.
And the fact that by the time you reach out to them, it's negative. So we're trying to solve this whole engagement model. And, in the new digital era, how do you build relationships with your consumers? And that's what the space that we're actually evolved in. So I kind of refounded or pivoted the company to a B2B space and really finding our footprint in the large enterprise space because they actually have an urgency to reinvent themselves or to quickly innovate. And so there's a lot of these new digital transformation teams, mobile teams that are actually building new business models. And those are the teams that we're actually helping to disrupt it or maybe even to solve their big problems. And they're not even really highly integrated with their core banking or core telco because that's just really keeping the lights on. But if you're now going lifestyle first, which most of these companies are trying to, because they want data, they want more and more data around their consumers. And so they have to build something that will entice them to come in. I mean, every app that you open, in the past, like banking, it just forces you to sign in and it just does one or two things, fund transfer, pay bills and look up accounts. But now they want you to go in and look at holidays and deals and rewards and lifestyle, health and wellness. Insurance companies are trying to get to that space as well. And so we're seeing so much change because core banking, core insurance, core telco is really growing at sub, 10%. And it's being disrupted by startups left and right. So they will have to move a lot quicker. So they're innovating a lot faster. That's why you see all of these companies with innovation labs. Right. It's not even funny. They're coming out faster than startups, actually. Every company has an innovation lab. I don't know what the hell they're innovating.
I'll tell you what they're innovating. They're innovating labs, and that's about it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Optically, it looks really cool, right? They have a co-working space that they're occupying, and it looks great.
But I'm convinced, actually, and I'm exaggerating to make a point, right? But I'm convinced that nothing innovative will come out of these labs for the reasons that you've said and that I agreed with. And that is, if you're sitting inside of a large insurance company, a large telco, and we can talk about telcos forever because I have a view there as well, and just large finance companies, right? And large banks, as you mentioned, to innovate inside there, like you said, there are 100 people making sure that one thing is okay. The problem for that 100 people is, let's say that something is written in C#. So they're on the .NET and they're using C# as their front end, and sure, they're using Java as the back end, right? But now they want to build an app or some kind of new application. The thing is, if they've been working on that infrastructure, whatever it is, for 5 or so years, that's kind of all they know.
Right.
And you cannot take the best lady or the best guy out of that position and then put them into a startup situation necessarily and have them excel internally. Now, you could take them out of that business completely, but just the pressure on them to keep the day-to-day business running, as you said, to keep the lights on, is so strong that they kind of don't have the resources and haven't allocated the resources to innovate. So even if you open an innovation lab, it's not staffed with people that are ready to innovate, and the major company is more worried about, my bonus is based on what happens this year. Not what I did, not for me to develop growth for the next 3 to 5 or 5 to 15 years out. So the management has an incentive to get stuff done right now that's going to generate revenue today. And innovation, as you know, takes time.
Exactly.
But I've got another question for you. And you said this earlier, but I really wanted to follow up on it. You said you pivoted from B2C, right? So from big businesses to individual consumers to B2B. What is wrong in the B2C space? And I don't disagree with you. I just want your perspective. But what is wrong in the B2C space that made you pivot to B2B?
Well, if you're developing another lifestyle app, that's not really going to work because how many users will actually download it? Consumers are so fickle these days and they are spoiled with choice, right? So why would they even use you? So it's not a sticky model. It's a really hard model to maintain. So what is sticky today that you cannot live without every day as a consumer or as a citizen? It's banking, government, telco services, and insurance. That's like part of your daily lives, and maybe transit, right? And so these are things that are so sticky. So we thought, okay, if that's sticky already, I must download my banking app. I must have some insurance. I must, leverage my telco provider for my mobile capability. So a lot of that is evolving around, okay, what can consumers live without and cannot? Well, I can live without another lifestyle app, but I can't live without my banking app.
Right.
So So that's where we were thinking about transitioning. Well, if that's the case, and banks are innovating and they're trying to move into the fintech space, and then insurance are moving into insurtech, how do we help them engage customers, build more retention? And I always say loyalty is dead, so how do you build moments of viral spending or engagement with millennials or your next generation? Because yes, your existing generation that's been keeping your lights on and feeding the bill, they're not the ones that you want to really build a loyalty with. It's the millennials, right? So we're really looking at how do we help you future-proof your business versus, help you save costs with your existing problems. Yeah. Everything that we do is revenue impactful.
And so what you've done is kind of flip the model around, it sounds like, as opposed to your direct customers being me, your direct customers actually end up being the big enterprises. Is that a fair characterization? And and that fits in perfectly, if you don't mind me saying, to what you know how to do ridiculously well, no?
Yeah, I mean, all the startups I actually worked with had served the enterprise, and we that was the sweet spot. I think once you, let's say, acquire 10 of the top logos around the world, or even regionally, right, the tier 1 brands, everybody follows suit. You've already found the product market fit. You've already found sustainability. And then now you want to now expand to the SME market or mid-market. It's much easier that way. And so our model was, maybe it's just my training and what I know from Silicon Valley. A lot of companies start out, like Xero, right? Xero is extremely successful, and they went after the SME model, and they are solving a different problem. And for our business model, we're solving another problem that, in terms of marketing and engagement technology, it's just something that didn't exist in Asia. And we're competing against the global players, and they're not really focusing on, Asia per se. 90% of the revenue comes from Europe and US and Japan. So why would they even look at Asia?
Yeah, I mean, for those of us that live here, it feels like a massive opportunity, right? Even from the investment side, when I talk to venture capitalists in the United States, they say things like, I don't have enough visibility in Asia to make an investment. And I think what's going to end up happening, not just on the investment side, but on the company development side as well, is that they're going to wake up one day and it's going to look like 1,000 overnight successes.
Right.
Right. They're going to say, oh my gosh, Perx, they must have just been founded in 2016 or 17 because now it's really successful, right? And yet it's been going since 2012. Right.
Exactly.
So when I'm really interested in the difficulties here. When you came in, what year did you say you came in? Because the company's been around for a little bit of time, yeah, already.
Yeah, so the app business has been around since, you said, 2012.
It wasn't that long.
I came at the end of 2014. So I've been around almost 3 years now.
Now, what was it like internally for you coming in, right? You'd always dealt with enterprises. It was a B2C company. What was it like, or how hard was it for you to sort of convince the people that were already there? Again, a slight legacy problem, not like it would be at a big company, and convince them and say, we've dedicated ourselves to sort of trying to get people to download the app and then to interact with local SMEs to get their perks, right? Mm-hmm. What was it like to convince them and say, what we really want to do is go to where the users already are and provide them with the perks or provide them with the benefits of our service and say, we now need to sell to, UOB?
Yeah, it was very difficult because you're not only solving the user side of the coin, but you're also trying to acquire as many merchants onto the app, building a marketplace. And it's a burn rate, right? So it's a burn model. It's a race to the bottom model. Any B2C businesses is really a race to the bottom. I don't know any B2C businesses that are profitable as of yet for the first few years. So if you're really looking at building a sustainable business and providing that whole cash flow positive model, I think for me is, again, going back to what I'm familiar with. So when I've learned this business on the B2C side, I actually trip over myself a few times, and I made some mistakes and hired the wrong people because I didn't really have experience in that space. The B2C space was very new to me. The digital space was very new to me because I was large apps, I was infrastructure, I was, on the back end, because in the 90s and 2000s, we were really just trying to move large enterprises into virtualization, cloud, automation, big data, all that stuff. And now it's mature. So there's no more upselling. It's getting flat growth. And so what else can we do? You have to move to the front line, which is the whole digital transformation side from the consumer space. Exactly. So I wanted a challenge for myself as well. And it's a damn hard challenge. And, I made some mistakes, definitely. And you kind of quickly pick yourself back up and just be as humble as you can. So I try to hire also a more established team. And now we have a few SAP folks, ex-Oracle folks working with us. And it's quite refreshing now to see that a similar experience in your team. And, Ramco, also our head of marketing is from Ramco, another SaaS company. So they understand how to grow companies because my head of sales was with SAP when they were like 3,000 globally. Now, how many people does SAP have?
It's massive, right?
Yeah, it's massive. So he knew when he grew the Asia business, they had nothing, no resources. People had to fly out from Germany to help them, and so it's a very similar experience for him now, and he loves a new challenge, in the digital space. I think a lot of these traditional software players or seasoned execs are looking at coming to the side of the world because they're seeing very I would say mature markets that are not really exciting them anymore.
Right. I mean, two things have changed secularly, right? The first is they don't want to work at a big company anymore because, whether it's SAP or Oracle, if they're not growing by acquisition, then they're just trying to split up an existing pie as opposed to split up a pie that's growing faster than they can eat at it, which is kind of what you're trying to do. And second of all, like you said, if you want to get something done, it's just so hard, no matter how good or how powerful you are inside of, insert name of company. It still takes way more time than it does if you're sitting around a board meeting, right? And Anna says, okay, we need to enter this market or we need to get a sales team into this company. They'll go, okay, I'll do that tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's just such a different environment. And I think regardless of age, even if you've been in a company for 20 years, if you just have any pride, right? You really just want to do something big. And frankly, you want to do it in an environment that's fun as well. I mean, I was going to ask you, like, what's the difference between, working in San Francisco in an enterprise sales company and working at a smaller company, right, in Singapore? It's got to be just as hard as it is. It's got to be way more fun and way more rewarding at the end of the day. And I think that plays into all of your strengths, but it also plays into hiring all the best people, no?
Oh yes, it's night and day. It's so different. I mean, there's so much talent, and the DNA and the talent pool is very different obviously in the Bay Area and in the US. Here, acquiring talent, engineering, and sales is just so hard because if you're used to working in the top 10 MNCs and all of a sudden I'm trying to recruit you over and you're like, I'm very comfortable making my $300,000 a year, which we can't afford, right? But it's more of a rewarding experience, high risk, high rewards. And do you have the guts and the bravado to come in and take a chance at a new opportunity? And many people actually shy away from it. They are risk averse. So for me, it's much harder to acquire talent for a B2B startup. B2C would be very easy because you can hire anybody and they can get the model quickly. How long would it take to understand a utility app or, a B2C e-commerce app? And so I think, for us, it's so hard because we need that really seasoned experience, the complex sales cycle, the training, account mapping, all of that, and negotiation, right? If you come from a very green environment, then it's really hard to train you up.
It is actually really hard. And again, I find this interesting too. You said, leave your $300,000 a year job. I bet if you ask most people if they're happy at work, they'll tell you no. Right.
But they're willing to...
They're willing to sell their soul.
Yeah.
This is just Michael's philosophy in the morning. but I strongly believe that if There's a way to convince somebody that if you don't sell your soul for money today, you'll be so much happier later in life, because you'll wake up one day and you'll be 60 years old and you'll just think, what have I done? Mm-hmm. And I think frankly, it's a great trade. And I think it's relatively easy, actually, if you convince somebody early enough, like do something with purpose. And I actually feel like I meet a lot of, and I'll say kids, and I don't mean that pejoratively, right? But I meet a lot of people between, let's say, 25 and 35, and they're actually searching for something to do with purpose.
Yeah. Right.
And I think that matters to people. And again, having purpose doesn't necessarily mean, saving a seal somewhere. And although there's nothing wrong with that. And again, I don't say that poorly as well. But I think they want to be able to have influence. And what you're doing, right, if you work at Perx, everything you do has impact. Otherwise, you're not doing a good job. No?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And so you made a very good point that the word purpose is so important for us, because many people just want to come in, and this is some of the mistakes that I've made, right, by hiring employees. I didn't know that they were just looking for a job.
Right.
And they didn't have a purpose of helping us build a great company, but they just wanted a job. And they wanted to come and just learn. Well, startup sounds so fun and sexy, and I just want to learn. Well, but you came here for a reason, right?
What was that reason?
Right, and so we really needed everyone to run at the same speed. And if one bad apple infects the team, then we end up taking one step forward, two steps back. And that's been some of the challenges that I've faced. And now, looking at hiring, we have to go with this more seasoned people. And that's why, talking to the board, talking to our investors, saying, it's a completely different ballgame here. If you're selling to the enterprise, you cannot hire monkeys or junior people to come run in these accounts, because they wouldn't know how to manage and talk to the CXO, right?
Right.
And so that's some kind of, that's a huge shift that we had to make. And we replaced 100% of the team when I took it over. And it's still not perfect, but at least, we're getting there, and we're building momentum, and we're establishing ourselves.
So do you feel like you get a different response today when you go to, I love the way you said this, the 10 largest logos in the world. What a great phrase. I'm going to use that actually from now on. But when you go to large enterprises, are you getting a different response now because the sales team is more sort of savvy and more experienced and maybe just, more professional?
Absolutely. I think they can sense it because we anticipate and we know their buying behavior. We understand them so well because we've been selling to the same folks over and over again. They too
Right.
are getting savvier too, right? They get trained to deal with vendors. And so we have to one up them, and we have to really understand, but also advise them. I think one thing great, and this is why I really love startups. You come in walking in as a startup because you're so proud of your technology. You're so proud of your product solving a big problem, and you come in advising them versus talking about saving costs, talking about Me Too, talking about features, because then it's game over. You're just another, commoditized product.
Right.
But if you're coming in feeling so motivated and so optimistic and consulting the customer, they take something back, and you're helping them actually establish themselves as well as a more relevant player. And maybe even, help them with redefining their business model. So that was something that really resonated with us, and that's why I love startups.
Yeah, do you find, and I think about this a lot, do you find when you go into a large enterprise, you're actually trying to find not the one person, but maybe a group of people who've already identified the fact that something needs to change, and in your space that they need to work with someone like your team or even build it internally, but they can't do it? Do you try to find that person? And then they can just point to you and say, see, it's not me. Anna's saying we have to do this thing, so you may think I'm an idiot, but she's not an idiot, so I must be right, kind of thing. Do you find that person?
Absolutely. And so this is how we start building our product market fit as well, right? And we start with one person. It could be the CMO, or enterprise sales is very high touch, right? We're not selling to developers. We're not a developer's tool, right? So then it's not a Slack type of model, or it's not a New Relic model where you actually hit the developer community. But this is revenue impactful. Who has the most pressure to deliver? someone who heads a P&L or someone who's, measured on the amount of leads and revenue at the end of the day, right, that they bring in. So it's the head of cards or head of sales, so we work with those guys or the MD of a group, and it's a very high touch, senior management top-down approach. So we hit ourselves with those candidates first and really understand what's their biggest pain point. Well, if you want to grow your revenue or you want to effectively optimize your marketing spend, then how do you do that? And so we're trying to educate them more so than try to displace any of the existing investment. If you walk in like you know everything and you're going to, it's a one-stop shop, this will solve every problem, that's the wrong approach, and then you'll get kicked out faster than anything. But we come in saying, you know what, you've invested millions of dollars into your infrastructure with all of these different marketing cloud solutions, CRMs, automation, and whatnot, and analytics tools. Well, continue, using them for a purpose, but none of them actually touch the consumers in real time. None of them are solving your real consumer problems. And that's why we're talking to you now. If you want a platform to help you solve sales now and drive revenue and increase spend, and then also bring value to your partners in the ecosystem, that's really resonates with them. And so I think when you hit that pain point and the person with the most pressure to deliver, that's where we were actually hitting, rather than the CTO or CIO or the mid-management guys. We don't even sell to the back end anymore.
Right. I was going to say it's a completely different sales model, right? And I was just thinking I'd love to sit in on a couple of sales meetings just to see people's responses. I'm convinced, right, just based on my own experience, that people need these tools and they cannot get them built internally. I'm just so convinced of this.
Right. I mean, because they're not developed that way. They never thought about their consumers. The consumers, the last thing that they thought about, they always thought about infrastructure first. Right. And, compliance, risk, all of these things. Now it's just another check mark. It's another process. Now go fix my revenue issues.
Right. And even more so, I think what you're referencing, unless I'm wrong, is in the financial world, right? With all of the pressure on the finance companies, whether it's MiFID II or any of the other regulations that they have to sort of program against, their tech teams spend so much time developing that type of back-end technology that you're right, they don't have time to focus on how am I going to grow the revenue of my customer as opposed to just not get shut down by the regulators.
Right, exactly. And, I hear banks hiring 50 to 100 data scientists, and they're cranking out AI models and all these different tools, but none of them actually are used in real time. So I said, this is a massively expensive call center. Still, the data that you actually now manipulated and you built around are still sitting in the infrastructure, is not being used in real time. So when are you going to start making money? Right? And so everything is very reactive. That's why I feel so passionate about this space. And no one has solved the space yet.
No, it's really interesting. I was going to ask you who the other competitors were, because I followed, I don't know how to explain this properly. I ran into, I believe, and I could be wrong here, but I was in Singapore once in 2012, and I was sitting in a coffee shop on Club Street one morning, and I had my laptop open, and the guy next to me had his laptop open, and I think, if my memory serves me correctly, that was Andrew, actually.
Okay.
So I think, but again, I'm getting old, so my memory doesn't serve me so well. But the whole business is so completely different, and every other competitor that even existed then feels to me like it's gone. And what it means is that whatever you're doing, right, the switch from B2C to B2B, and attacking the customers from their source, right, which is really where they're getting all their services, has to be the right model. I mean, I agree with that implicitly anyway. Right, and we can talk a lot about B2B versus B2C, but I agree with this model actually more than B2C. And like you said, if you look at the statistics, nobody even downloads a new app anymore. So just getting someone to download it anew is almost impossible, right?
Right.
But what's more interesting to me is your use of data, right? We can talk about buzzwords and big data and stuff, but data does matter, yeah. But you're right. If it's sitting in a database somewhere, no matter how much you manipulate it after the fact, unless you're doing this in real time, you're losing a revenue opportunity at the point where that data gets created. And I'm really curious on your view there.
Yeah, and this is the fundamental problem, right? So there's so many, I would say big data tools out there, Watson's, you have Hadoop, and all these different frameworks and platforms. And then you have visualization tools like Click and Tableau. They do their job really well, but essentially it's still reactive. It's still internally focused, right?
Right.
So now what happens if a marketer or a sales organization runs a campaign and then they realize that this campaign, like after 30 days, didn't really make any money or have any conversion, and then they go back to the analysts and the BA tools and try to manipulate the data, understand why it failed. I mean, now 3 months later, you realize, okay, crap, we could have done it this way. But if you had a real-time solution, you can see the activity live, and you see that this campaign actually did not drive the success or the ratio that you wanted. So you can actually quickly pivot, or maybe even adjust that campaign. So this is why if you're not using the data in real time, and a lot of them talk themselves out of that because of the compliance and the risk and the data privacy. Europe in January in 2018, a lot of the governments are actually forcing these financial institutions and large enterprises to actually expose themselves to open API models and start integrating with third-party solutions. And they're forcing them to the cloud. So if one continent is doing that, Asia we always say Asia is falling behind in cloud adoption and whatnot. But because this is also one of the higher smartphone adoption regions, it could move even quicker to the cloud. But I think with the 700 million plus in Southeast Asia, and most of these are millennials, and they're actually more mobile and digitally savvy than anybody. I think this region has so much potential to disrupt and force their big service providers to act faster. And so we're working with that. We're seeing a transition. I mean, 1 year ago, when we talked to some of the regional enterprises, they were not ready, and they really had 1,000 excuses why they couldn't do it. And now they're just moving fast and faster. And they said, look, we have a different way of actually bypassing this. So they found loopholes in their organization to adopt technology. So it's fantastic.
Not a big surprise. And
right.
I think I have a non-traditional view on privacy. And you've mentioned privacy sort of peripherally, but with the concept of every millennial carrying a smartphone, which is really just a supercomputer in their pocket, right, and giving them access to data constantly, I really believe that privacy is a relatively new, it's a new concept. Just culturally, it's a new concept. New meaning last 100 years, maybe last 70 years, right? Like, you don't have the right to know what I'm doing. But if I can give you my birthday or, my weight or how much money all these things, I can actually have a better life in return, or a better experience in return, if I'm willing to give some of that stuff away. And you can disagree with me on the privacy thing, but and my views on privacy have changed actually quite a bit over the last few years. I think in Asia in particular, with all of the social media and all of the sort of activity that we have in public, that people's lives are getting more public anyway, and people are willing to trade some of that information for just a better experience.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And it's inevitable that, it's already exposed, right? A lot of our information is out there. So there is no privacy. I don't even understand why we're so caught up with that. Because the minute you log onto Facebook, LinkedIn, and all these different sources, you're already exposing yourself so much more. And the minute you download another app, you log in through Facebook, your data is already exposed. So there's so many different ways to acquire information, and you already opted in. Nobody reads T's and C's anymore. Every time you open they're
not written to be read anyway, right? So
yeah, exactly. And then you just click agree, and then you proceed. So I think we underestimate. I think that because the regulation is so well managed, and there's boundaries of policies, I think they're trying to catch up with the big data play and all of the AI play, because the more and more these companies need to evolve, and evolve quickly, I think government, geopolitical policies will actually have to act even quicker. And that's why the companies like Airbnb and Uber are disrupting them, and they're fighting these local regulations because they're so ahead of the game.
Yeah,
And so I think that's where, the startups disrupt policies and government.
Right. I mean, I read a lot about this concept of privacy and information flow, and I think that whatever the established institutions are making a much bigger deal out of it than the people that they're trying to help, actually, because I don't think those people care necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, like, again, going back to like Xero, right? It's an accounting tool. You have QuickBooks Online, that's an accounting tool, but you're comfortable with putting all of your financial services in the cloud, but you're not comfortable. So that's why some of this is backwards. And we challenge a lot of these financial institutions as well. I'm like, you're using third-party tools to do so many different things.
Right.
So how, by integrating with third-party email, push or the EDM providers or the push notifications, they're all in the cloud. And so why are you complaining about privacy now?
Well, look, I can make a really compelling argument that the march towards no privacy at all, or the march towards third-party services, has been happening since the beginning of time. So just bear with me for a second, right? Mm-hmm. I have a cow and you have a sheep, right? And I keep that cow behind a fence in my yard, and then I want to trade for your sheep. This is barter, right, writ large. But then money gets invented, and I say, look, I'll give you a cow later because it's too young now. But in replacement for that, I'll give you an IOU. So now we've created money. But now I've got to have a place to store my money. Oh, shucks, I don't want anyone to know how much money I have, but I want it to be safe, so I put it in a bank. And I'm moving faster than all this stuff really happened, right? Mm-hmm. And then now there's a bank that has all of my assets. They know what I have. So now I've traded, because before no one knew how many cows I had, but now the bank knows for sure how much I have. And then if I want to get a loan to build a business, now I've got to get people to recommend me, and I've got to get a bunch of people that don't know me and don't care about me to know how much money I have. It's just a slow burn into everybody knows everything about everybody else. And then, we talk about the blockchain, right? So you put everything on a blockchain, which is actually a public ledger. So where's the privacy, and where do people really care? All people really want at the end of the day is safety and a good life experience. And I think a lot of people are willing to trade, like, do you really care if I have $110,000 in the bank or $100,000 in the bank? I don't think anybody really cares. And I think people they've been doing this forever, right? Humans have been sort of trading that away forever for safety, security, and for a better experience. And I don't think it's going to stop now. And the only thing that stops it, sorry for being a little political, but the only thing that stops it is sort of embedded interests and legacy systems. And once you get past that, which is what we've been talking about for the last hour, everything gets to grow naturally. Right.
Exactly. I totally agree. And this whole blockchain with the cashless society and all the movement towards that, it's inevitable. So that's why banks have to move much quicker. And I see their innovation labs or hubs piloting blockchain right now, designing in the sandbox and trying to figure out how to use it before they get disrupted even more.
Right. But by the time they're done, I'm sorry, I can't stop laughing. By the time they're done in the innovation lab, there will already be 15 companies in China that have already built it, 3 in the United States and 10 in Europe. So I just don't believe that that's the right way to do this, which is why you're doing what you're doing outside of a big organization, right?
Right, exactly. You have so much more freedom to make mistakes and also to accomplish some successes, right?
And you just sound so happy doing what you're doing.
I'm laughing but crying inside.
Welcome to my world.
Yeah.
Look, I have so many other questions for you, but I don't want to take up so much more of your time. I hope this has been okay for you, and hopefully you'll take some time and come back. There's so many other parts of your life that are interesting to me that I think are useful to share, right? I mean, not to get back to the privacy thing, but part of being an entrepreneur is not just waking up every day and going to work. It's all the other things that are around it as well, right? And you're involved in a whole bunch of other things that I guarantee you are helpful to business, but that's not why you do them. But I'd love to talk about those as well. So hopefully you'll come back.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for this opportunity.
Anna, really, it was a complete pleasure. I was nervous at the beginning. Hopefully I did okay in the end.
You made me nervous.
That's not good.
Eventually it all actually solved itself out. So it's good. Okay. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
I really appreciate your time, Anna. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Asia Tech Podcast. Find out more at www.asiatechpodcast.com.